Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special edition of the Geeks Who Like Sports Leaderboard interviews. As always, I'm Ray Carcillo in beautiful Los Angeles, California. Joined my best friend over in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lee Elias. And today we have a very special guest. You know him as the writer, director, producer, actor. If he's near and dear to our hearts because we've grown up with many of his films, from obviously the Mighty Ducks trilogy, Heavyweights, Little Nicky, Mr. Deeds, and of course now on Disney Plus, Mighty Ducks Game Changers. Steve Brill is here. Steve, how's it going?
And Hubie Halloween. Come on, that's the best.
I'm sorry. The list is it's a long list. We only got so
Throwing
much
the
time
Netflix
with you, Steve.
movie at you, man.
I mean, come on, man. Thank you. Good to be here. Feeling good. Nice to see you guys. You guys have been doing good stuff.
Thanks, Steve.
Over the years. Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, it's funny. I said this before the episode. I'm wearing my Mighty Ducks jersey for those of you who can't see us and are listening to the podcast. My actual original D1 Mighty Ducks jersey. I was thinking there's not going to be another episode we do of Geeks Who Like Sports where this is more appropriate. So you know,
man.
I thought it was a little corny, but I'm like, no, I'm going for it. It makes too much sense.
It's cool. It's symbolic. It means, you know, you ducks fly together. You're a duck.
Absolutely.
Jersey.
Only when I'm not rooting for the Flyers, who are out of the playoffs right now, of course. But I'll tell you this, Steve. You don't know this about me, but most of my life's been dedicated to the game of hockey. I work in hockey. I have companies in hockey. And like most people my age, the Mighty Ducks had a massive influence on getting me into the game. And I really need to start the episode just by thanking you for that, because I don't think you ever get enough credit for what you created. This is a movie that has spawned hockey fans around the world. And it came along at the right time, and it was an unbelievable message. It's been obviously great watching Game Changers. But I got to tell you that, man, like you created something special and near and dear to everybody's heart.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it was fortuitous, and I don't feel like I didn't create hockey or even kids sports movies, but at the time I did it, there hadn't been many or any in a long time since Bad News Bears, and also hockey was sort of it wasn't fringe, but it certainly wasn't one of the top 2 or 3 watch sports. Not that it is now, but the point is that I fell in love with hockey, or fell in love with hockey back in the 80s in Los Angeles. Before Gretzky got here, I got back into hockey, and I played it as a kid, and I rediscovered how much I loved it, and how much I loved watching it, and how much I loved playing it. And just that pure love of the game and the sport and the beauty of it inspired me. And so that's what makes me happy, that my true affection for the sport, that I was able to put it into the movies, and then the movies created other people's affection for the sport is great. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, like Lee said, your movies like really inspired a lot of us growing up. I'm not as dedicated to hockey as Lee is, but it's also near and dear to my heart as well. But yeah, you mentioned the Kings. I mean, like, is that your team? Are you a big sports guy? Before obviously the Ducks came into existence and kind of have to become your de facto team? What were your teams growing up?
Well, in hockey or any sport?
In all sports.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in a town called New Hartford, which is right next to Utica and Clinton, which is really where Slapshot was made. Right. And it was about the Iron Hockey League in that era. And so I love this team, the Clinton Comets. And those were the first hockey games I saw. Literally the Slapshot games were the games I saw. They were rough and tumble, but really exciting. And also being in upstate New York in the 60s, there was only so much on TV, and the Bruins were actually bigger than the Rangers for some reason. Western Mass was closer to upstate New York, and I was a Bruins fan, Esposito and Orr in that era, and a Buffalo Bills fan back then. And then I moved to Florida when I was 12, which is why I stopped playing hockey. And that was in the early 70s, and I became a Miami Dolphins fan. And I was a Dolphins 1972. I was a fan before they went undefeated, just so you know. And
good time to be a Dolphins fan, to be fair.
Yeah, I was a Dolphins fan. And then also they had spring training baseball down there. Baseball is my other passionate sport that I love. And I love the Yankees growing up too. So it was that sort of mix of upstate New York, and then Miami.
You're 1 for 3 with Ray right now. I can tell you that.
Why? What?
I'm the biggest Yankees fan in the world. I grew up in North Jersey, so I feel you there. So yeah. So
Well, the Yankees of the '70s. That was another great team to follow when I was a kid.
The Bronx Zoo.
Yeah, that was great.
Very cool. So so now, of course, obviously, Mighty Ducks Game Changers is on Disney Plus. It is big success. We're all loving it every time we watch it. It's not just a nostalgia trip, but it's obviously it really stands on its own. Why bring the Ducks back now? What made you want to bring this back now? This now?
Well, I'd always thought about ways to bring it back. Certainly, there was no conclusion that was final. At the end of Ducks 3, we didn't know what happened to Emilio. The kids were going to get older, but we didn't know what happened. So I definitely wanted to check in on everybody. And then I'd had many thoughts about what would be a fourth movie, but it didn't seem like Disney or anybody was making sports movies in the last 5 to 10 years. It sort of didn't become a theatrical option. So streaming, the advent of streaming, which has helped so many writers, directors, and actors do really cool stuff, streaming and premium TV, whatever you want to call it. I started thinking about that as a venue whereby we could do a 4 or 5 hour movie, 10 half hours, and essentially think of it, because I don't really know TV that well, or I didn't, think of it as a 5 hour movie, and then call that Ducks 4. And that's sort of what this is structured as. And Josh Goldsmith and Cassie Yuspa, my partners on this, came from television, but also had a film background. And so we crafted this story that would arc out and feel like a sports movie, which is something I really wanted to do. And we were able to do it on the Disney Plus platform, which just, we're one of the first shows on it. So very lucky, very fortuitous. And that's why we did it.
I can tell you when it was announced, everybody in my circle went nuts, obviously, because of what was going on. Before we get into the original Ducks movies, I do want to stay on Game Changers for a minute, because one of the things I love about how you wrote this, Steve, is that it is just so ever slightly self-aware, right? Like it kind of knows it's the Mighty Ducks. And that's through some of the dialogue, obviously, and some of the callbacks.
Yeah.
But the one thing I really love that you've done is kind of tackled some of the modern issues in youth sports, unapologetically too, right? And it's funny because when we do our live streams of it, I am constantly saying, and Ray will back me up on this, I'm like, that is not that far-fetched what you're looking at right now. That crazy parent, that is not that far-fetched, right? And I said that, the lady who has like a psychologist for her middle school, like that, I've seen that.
Right.
Like it's not crazy. So how much of that went into your writing process of like, I want to tackle modern issues. And then, obviously you have to weave in the people my age, right? That know these stories and grew up on these stories, so that I guess we're satisfied, even though it's for kids. Like, let's not be lost on that. Right.
Yeah.
Can you just walk us through that process of how you got to where you are?
I was certainly comfortable with recreating the feel of the original movies in whatever form, another movie or another show, because I always felt they were fairly timeless or evergreen. Like the sports movie is the sports movie. It's underdogs. It's, the Magnificent Seven. You get the team together and they overcome the obstacles. And I don't think that ever needed to be updated, that idea. And I love the idea of setting it back in Minnesota also, so it would literally have the same feel as the first movie, which is always going to be near and dear to my heart. And then when Josh and Kathy came in, we're all parents of kids that are sort of, they have slightly older kids that are into competitive sports, and just this idea that it has become a way to get somewhere as opposed to something to enjoy more, became a theme that we developed, and found that was a real good starting point for the next series, is saying, well, not only did the Ducks turn into this factory, which I felt was a reasonable evolution without Gordon. Once you take Gordon and Charlie out, and they just become a dynasty. Well, this could be the outcome of that if they're under the wrong administration. And that sort of became the thought that that's also what happened in some of youth sports, not all of youth sports, obviously. But we took that idea that it would be too driven and maybe too pressurized. And that was something that could spin the new team off of the old team, and then we could follow them as they go through it, and ultimately we'll see what happens with them. But I wonder. I guess we'll have to watch the next 4 episodes to see what happens.
I was just going to say, we should mention that when we're recording this, we're about halfway through the series on Disney Plus. The last
6
episode,
to 10, the
last episode, one you directed, which I thought was phenomenal. If there was any episode that felt like, for obvious reasons, the original films, this one clearly was tugging at those heartstrings a bit, and again, it's not a spoiler, but a lot of the original Ducks were in this episode. So that's the other question I have is, I mean, I don't know if you were on set when that was recorded. Obviously you were if you were directing, but there's 2 questions I have here, right? Then I'll throw it back to you. I'm geeking out hardcore here, but that's the whole point of the show though, right? I look at this 2 ways. One is, how fun was it to write like Adam Banks 20 something years later, right? And Connie and all these characters 20 years later. And then what was it like to be around them again? Because they're all adults now, right? I mean, it's a totally different experience.
Yeah, well, I had been in touch with most of them, luckily, over the 25 years. Plus, we had a few reunions just for us, not for
That's special.
5 years ago, 7 years ago, we sort of stayed in touch. Our doors are always open to each other. I worked with a couple people, or tried to, over the last 25 years. Then there was a big reunion when Ducks 2, I think, or Ducks 1 had a 25th anniversary that Anaheim invited us to. So we all stayed in touch. Then when the show happened, certainly it wasn't about turning a page on any of those people. I really wanted to keep them present and accounted for in the new series. So it was really fun. We had a writing staff that we created, and the writing staff included everyone was a fan of the franchise. Everyone knew it really well and knew the movies, but some of them were kind of like, if you were a writer, just geeks about what happened to Portman, where this came. And I was like, so to their credit, this one particular guy, Todd Linden, was the writer of this episode. And in the writer's room where we all sort of developed the stories and stuff, he obviously was the one who could help and add to all these people's stories. So it was really fun to sort of, with him and the other writers, figure out what had happened. I had thought, I had thought about everyone's arc over the years and have my own ideas. And then we were able to jam on, for this episode, how they could integrate. And it was a blast. And then when they showed up, it was just an incredible experience, because we had Amelia with them, who hadn't seen them in 20 years. Amelia's just been separate, or hadn't been part of reunions or anything. So that was incredible. And they always looked to him and me to some degree as not parents, but we were the older people in their lives through this formative period of when they were 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Like there was like a 6-year run for 3 movies that we had with these people, these kids who are now adults. So it was trippy and great and awesome to get everyone back together. And everyone fell right back into their characters, even though literally these are now 40-plus-year-olds who have kids of their own, a lot of them. It's pretty funny.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that the Ducks franchise in the show becomes kind of like a factory, right? You remove Gordon, and it's like taking the heart really out of the Ducks, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, he's still here. He's back in the show. Obviously, he's at the Ice Palace. But he's kind of one of several hearts, almost, if you would, right? He's kind of an ancillary, but he's the main character, but there's several main things. What went into the decision to not necessarily make him the centerpiece of the show, but still be obviously a major support structure for the other characters?
Yeah, well, that was involved in cracking the initial story, which did revolve around Evan and his mom starting their own team. That was sort of the core idea we had. And then I wouldn't say retrofitted or reverse engineered Emilio getting into it, but we kind of did. I mean, we knew that's how we were going to readapt the story, is have a new group pulled out from the old group, and where Emilio fit in was something we had to figure out. And I think it just laid in really nicely with the structure we were thinking about. And then it became sort of the perfect way to keep him in, but also, like you say, keep him like he's not the centerpiece, and that everything's not revolving around him so far in all these episodes. But we'll see what happens. Yeah.
You know, what's funny in live streaming, we hear from a lot of Ducks fans, and it's funny how deep some of them can get sometimes. So we do a lot of Marvel streams as well. So, you know, with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and, you know, fans go deep. And it's funny because we'll have a guy on the show be like, when is Coach O'Reilly going to show up? And like, he's going like Ducks. You know, like it's amazing to me that and look, who knows, right? Obviously you do, but we don't. But my point is, who knows what's going to happen, but it's amazing how deep they'll go into a part of a story of D3, D2, whatever. And want to see that. It just shows you how ingrained these films are. You know, Steve, I want to tell you, I lived in England for a time, and working in hockey nonetheless. And it's funny because you were humble before about your place in the game, but there's a lot of Ducks fans in England because of the Mighty Ducks films, and they all have this jersey I'm wearing. I mean, it's amazing to me because I knew it spread in my area growing up, but like it really has become a worldwide thing. I mean, it really rippled through the world. And keeping in mind too, obviously for our listeners that might be a little younger, I mean, these came along at the perfect time, right? I mean, in terms of hockey, Wayne Gretzky was completely changed the game at that point. You know, there were no lockouts yet. You know, enjoyable time to be part of the game. You can still get physical. One of my favorite scenes of the last episode is where Banks gets hit into the bench really hard, right? And he goes, "That was awesome. Let's go come back." And I'm like, "That's hockey. That's what it used to be."
Yeah, that's funny. That's the old school. That is a nod to the old school way the game was played.
Right.
That's funny that you say that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ray.
So going back to like when the Ducks originally come out, I want to just know, when Disney says, or when the NHL says that they're making an actual franchise based off of the Ducks, the movie, right? Where we're going to make an actual hockey team, an actual expansion franchise that's going to be called the Mighty Ducks. What's going through your mind when that happens?
That's a good question. That's an interesting question that I would want to know the answer to if I were on your side too. You guys are geeks that like sports, right? So I'm a geek who loves sports, but I'm also a sports fan. So here's the interesting thing about that. When I was told, it was unveiled in front of me, literally at the pond. Michael Eisner, who was the brain behind all of this, had it in his mind that he was going to do this. He didn't tell us.
Oh no!
While we were making Ducks 2, that he was going to call. We knew they bought a team. We knew there was synergy between hockey and Disney, but I had no idea this was going to happen. So we all got brought down to the pond. I think it was called the pond at that time. I should have figured it out then. And they unveiled the name. And while I was sitting backstage or under the unfinished bleachers, these cement bleachers of what's now the Honda Center, I don't know what it's called now. Yeah. But Eisner and I were standing there, and we were about to walk out to this big unveiling, and there was this letters with sheets over it, and that was going to be what it was. And I think at that point I go, wow, man, they're going to call it the Ducks. That's the coolest thing ever. They're going to call it the Ducks. They're going to call it the Ducks. As I walked out, and Eisner's like, I think you'll like it. Eisner goes, I go, what's it going to be? He goes, I think you'll like it. And I go, oh, they're going to call it the Ducks. That's awesome. Which is ironically what they are now. But at that point, we walked out, and there was, all the Disney characters and fireworks and all that stuff. And they pulled off the name, and it said Mighty Ducks. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And part of me, which will be interesting to know, was like, that's ridiculous. I was like, as a sports fan, which I'll give myself props for, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think we'd call them like the Rangers, the Bruins, the Mighty Ducks. I was like, there was something in me that goes, this is not necessarily right. But then the much larger part of me was like, this is the coolest thing of all time.
Right.
That I get to have that title that I created become part of. Looking in the box scores for the next day, you could see the Mighty Ducks beat the Rangers, or But anyway, that's and now as we all know, franchises come and go, and names come and go, and nothing's permanent. And there's the original 6, but
well, don't tell that to Anaheim fans, Steve. Don't.
Well, what that
that the names come and go. I mean, if you listen, Wild Wing is a mascot that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And I'll tell you, it's funny.
Well, they took the mighty off, so I think they should. I swear, objectively, I think I don't like the new look, the black, the orange, the D. It's so.
I'm not a fan either.
I really think they should go back. I mean,
I think they're trying to.
Awesome.
Because the reverse retro is the one with Wild Wing right on the front, and then I mean, what's funny about what you're saying is, I remember when they unveiled that, there was a little bit of like, it's a Disney movie, it's cool, but what are you doing? But what's funny is, you move forward for 30 years, and it's like now it's this great piece of nostalgia in NHL history, and people want it back. I mean, that's it's a big part of their youth. And what I think is going to happen is mainly because my age group is now the big ticket buyer. They're going to do whatever we want them to do to make sure that we keep buying tickets, but that logo is ingrained, and that it's very unique, right? There's just not many teams out there that kind of have that story behind it.
No, and we developed that logo. The chronology is interesting. We developed that logo and did Mighty Ducks 2.
Right.
Before they named the team. They took it from us.
Right.
Yeah. We didn't take it from them. They, we developed it. We didn't know what the team was going to be named. They took our artwork and put it in. So it was virtually like a
Disney
lift
move
of everything. Yeah.
Does it get any royalties for that? Maybe you're a special credit on the Stanley Cup in 06 or something like.
Well, that's another story. That's another podcast of like, I was like
deep cuts.
Shouldn't I get something for this? And then,
the dark
and then
side
Eisner and those guys go, you know what? We're going to give you season tickets for 10 years.
Wow.
I was like, well, you say, wow. I go, I don't know. I don't think
that's a good start. Like,
start. But
I'll put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Would you rather have the royalties or your name on the Stanley Cup?
Don't put me on the spot. The royalties. You have to understand the royalties of what that team brought in, and if you buy the fact that people were buying stuff because of the movie that I wrote more than even hockey, then the royalties were $100 million,
right.
So I'll take that as opposed to the Stanley Cup, but
you buy your name onto the Stanley Cup at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get my own team. So anyway, it was a whole thing. I'm not bitter anymore, but we figured it out. And obviously Disney and I are good, or we wouldn't have done the show together. So now it's all new administration and stuff. So it's all fun.
All right, Ray, I got one more Ducks question before I don't want to duck this to death. But I see behind you have a Don't Bothers jersey, you have a Ducks jersey.
All
right. Again, for those of you listening. So now I'm trying to put pieces together here. This may or may not be a thing, but I noticed that you said you grew up a Bruins fan, and the Don't Bothers jersey is the traditional Bruins. Was that by you intentionally? And did I uncover an Easter egg that no one knows about yet?
That's funny because who doesn't love that original Bruins?
Right.
What do we call that color? Orange or
it's burnt yellow with brown.
Yeah.
And the answer is Rangers fans don't like that color.
I love that, but I also loved it from the Golden Gophers.
Right, Minnesota.
It has that feeling too. So when we developed this jersey and the look, we didn't want to do the green because if you saw the last episode, it's they're turning into that. They get to wear that in the 6th episode. So the Don't Bothers, I definitely want to stay away from a palette that was synonymous with anything teal, turquoise, or anything. And then that is definitely a color that was ingrained in my childhood from Bruins and also from the Golden Gophers, which was the Minnesota look. And it's just the coolest. I love it. Yeah.
So you sort of heard it here first.
Yeah, there you go.
We're not on a show known for big breaking stories. No, I heard you say that earlier. I was just starting to wonder that.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So you mentioned you're a geek like us, right? So outside of obviously, I mean, you're movie director, writer, producer, you're a big hockey guy, but what's the geekiest thing probably about you outside of all that?
Oh, by far that I was a kid magician and I went to magic camp. Yeah.
Of course you did. That's what you
of course I did.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I wasn't just a kid, a hobby magician. I got deep into it. I brought magic tricks to college my first semester. Then I realized that was not cool anymore. But I was that's pretty geeky because I was really into magic and and performing and went to magic camp. In fact, there's a Disney movie, believe it or not, called Magic Camp,
Right.
Which is I can't. I'm sorry, since I didn't direct it, I can't even look at it. I don't even know. Maybe it's about.
You just look at it and you already know how he does all the tricks, and so you can't.
I know he does
watch
tricks,
it.
but I'm like, why didn't they come to me with that movie? I'm like, I mean, the guy did heavyweights. Now it's magic, of course. And I went to Magic Camp the first year it opened, so I was the guy for that. But yeah, that's the geekiest thing. I think one of, right? That's pretty geeky, right? Magic.
No, that's definitely up there. Were you a rings guy, a rope guy, card tricks?
I was comedy magic, which is even geekier because you have a 10-year-old kid trying to tell one-liners. I was like, sometimes I see, who's the guy on South Park who tries to be funny, Timmy? Or no, the guy, the disabled kid who's like tries to do jokes all the time. Which character is that?
Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jimmy. Yeah. I was like, hey, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to tell you, like with one-liners, that I had gotten out of a joke book or a joke with patter. That reminds me of me. Yeah, I was a comedy magician, so that would do rings and ropes and close-up and everything, but it's supposed to be funny.
How did that transition into writing and producing and directing and everything else that you do? I mean, obviously there's not a long jump from being on stage as a magician to theater and beyond, but how did you get into the writing side of things?
Well, that I think it's all somehow together, part and parcel. It's but back in the day when I did magic and plays in high school, it was acting, it was performing, it was about just loving performing for people and in magic fooling people. And when you're acting, it's like making people laugh or cry. And I got interested in stand-up comedy, even though I didn't do it as a kid. And so that sort of exposed me to the world of entertainment as something that I didn't know you could do. My generation didn't know. I was growing up in Florida at the time. I didn't know you could be any of these things. I sort of figured that out later in college, that you could study film and you could write these scenarios that I was performing, and I had written my own magic acts and stuff. So I sort of put it together later that I could write stuff that I could either be in or direct. It's another concept I learned later in life, directing. That wasn't something I grew up knowing you could do. Like a lot of kids now grow up, yeah, Steven Spielberg, I love him. Like we didn't know anything about that. So it all sort of evolved from there, from acting and performing, and then realizing I could do it when I was in college, and then really getting into it, the writing and the acting. And that's why I have a wide resume, because I just loved it all. I didn't say I was an actor or a writer or a director. I just wanted to learn and do it all. And then my career sort of funneled and done all different things. And I still love it all.
I think that's awesome. You speak about directing. I one of my friends will kill me if I don't bring this up. One of your movies, I'll preface with this. I loved it. All right. Came out in 2000. You directed it, Little Nicky. All right.
Yeah.
And look, like that movie got mixed reviews for lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that movie because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that there was this just time period from 1995 till about 2001, I'll say, where kind of hard rock metal was really pop music for a time. And you kind of captured it in that movie. So I say to people all the time that, obviously it must have been awesome. You've worked with Adam Sandler many times, but that movie was one of my favorites growing up, but it really is one of those, it's a period piece in a weird way, where Ozzy Osbourne being in that movie is like, it's like, that's Ozzy in the movie. Oh my God. It's amazing to me, So I just wanted to hear a little bit about the process of jumping into that film. And behind the music and then obviously being in hell, and it was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, that was a big deal. That was a huge, I'm not going to say bomb, but Sandler was on a real roll up until there, and then I drove that bus right off the cliff.
That's not where I was going with it, but yeah.
No, we did it all together. I mean, that was Sandler's idea for a movie that I came in and wrote with him, and then I wasn't going to direct it because the only movie I'd done before that was Heavyweights, and this was a huge budget supernatural thriller. But I was writing it with him, and we would interview the directors. Would come in and Sandler would be like, "You want to be in the interview with John Landis or Joe Dante or all these people that I would hire to do that movie? Will come in and meet with Sandler to see if they would direct it." And then nothing really clicked with anybody. And then he just turned to me and was like, "How about you direct it?" I was like, "Oh, what?" It was literally, I told this story before. I was literally, I think, writing a scene in Central Park. 50,000 demons come out of the sewers and take over Central Park. And he goes, "Why don't you direct it?" And I go, 500 demons come out of Central Park. I was like, that's kind of was my attitude. I knew it was a huge movie because I was writing it. But I have to say, not that this is a advice thing, but I tend to say yes. And I think that's good advice. It's just to get through your neuroses and say yes to things. And that was an opportunity. It was scary, but I said, yeah, let's do it. And so I tried my best, and it became a cult classic.
Yeah, it did.
$80 million. And it's still, if you watch it, it's out there. I mean, it is aggressive. It is some people's favorite movies. And I understand if it's not anybody's favorite movie, because the character, like Hubie Halloween, is very, not hard to watch, but you have to get used to him.
Right.
So,
right. Zohan too.
yeah.
I think
Zohan,
it worked out all right for you and Sandler. I can't be sure.
Yeah.
But
It worked out great. Every character. I tend to do the ones that are a little extreme with them, or I think I do. But we did Sandy Wexler, another particularly funny character, and a bunch of others. But yeah, it's that was a cool movie. We had a lot of money, and we had a lot of toys to play with, and it was before special effects. Like, if we did that movie now, it would look nothing like it.
Oh, totally.
Every effect. Yeah. That was right at 1999, right when, if you wanted to do something, it was really expensive. Right now, like, you'd have to do motion control with the cameras, and right now you'd just be like, oh yeah, there's this there, the demons coming out, blah blah blah. Back then, it was the last era of really sort of hard to do special effects, and everything was very analog. Really, it was crazy.
Well, I want you to know I'm a supporter of that film, and I enjoyed it.
It's funny. I mean, there's some funny stuff in there, man. Sometimes I've seen some of it lately, and there's really funny stuff.
I agree.
Chicago, when he plays Chicago backwards.
Right.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
Oh man. Speaking of weird stuff, I want to go back a little bit, back to the with the Ducks. I wanted to ask before we got too far. So we talked about the team coming into existence as an actual NHL franchise. I want to also know what you thought when they turned it into a cartoon with alien ducks playing hockey against hockey teams. What did you think? Because again, it was one of the biggest things. You know, merchandise. We always joke about on the show, merchandising, right? So, like, you know, and obviously branching out. What did you when you saw it? You know, you got NHL franchise, now you got a cartoon. Yeah. What did you think? What did you think of the cartoon?
I'll be 100% honest, and this must have been right in the thick of my fighting with them, a very contentious part with Disney. When that came out, I never saw an episode. I still haven't seen an episode. I just looked at it and I was like, what is this? What is this? And obviously I had no connection to anything I did, so I didn't try to have a connection with it, and I pretty much ignored it and made it part of my lawsuit. I was like, well, I guess I deserve some of that too. But I honestly don't know anything about it. Maybe, I mean, very few people tell me they loved it or anything, but I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Didn't last too long.
I have not seen a frame of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a weird bridge between Darkwing Duck and Gargoyles. I'll say that much. So,
okay.
But yeah, in terms of the Disney afternoons, but so that's just my thoughts as an animation guy.
Well, yeah, and a geek, you know, but I don't have a lot of geeks. There's not a lot of geek love for that, as far as I can tell. I mean, I should get misdirected geek love, and I don't get any from that.
Misdirected geek love. That's a new one. I like that.
Yes, that's what it would be if it came to me. I'd be like, not my thing. But yeah.
Well, Steve, we really want to thank you for your time. Lee, do you have anything else? Or
Steve, I just want to again. I said at the beginning of the episode, but I want to say it again. I really want to thank you. I mean that you contributed to the game I love heavily.
Great.
Right. And and whether you think you have or not, I want you to know that you have, and that
Oh, I know it's a part of it, but like I said, the game it speaks for itself, and I was really glad to get it out there and give people the feeling of, like, you know, when I was at hockey games and a goal was scored, I would be like, wow, that feeling. And I was like, wow, if you could go to a movie theater and feel that when a goal scored, that would be cool. And and then the beauty of the game. thought it was awesome. But yeah, I'll take it. I'll say thanks, man. I'll take it.
You're welcome, man. Look, man, you know this. Until recently, being a hockey fan, especially in the 90s, wasn't the easiest thing in the world. There was no niche networks, right? There was no internet, right? We had to fight for our time, and that was our movie. And look, to be fair, man, no 8-year-old could go parading around like, yeah, Slapshot's the greatest thing ever. Like, we couldn't do that back then. Our parents were always like, you can see it when you're 12. I think that's old enough. But you
want me to feel like you sound like an oppressed class of people. It wasn't easy being a hockey fan.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't back then.
It was not easy.
Yeah.
It was definitely, you felt like you're in the wilderness sometimes.
A little bit.
Sure.
Right.
But playing it was always your thing. Like, you go out and put on rollerblades. I mean, were an awesome way to bridge the gap when you couldn't find ice and you could get a stick and blades. That was an awesome part of the 90s and 2000s that we put in Ducks 2.
I was just going to say that with Bombay with the skates. Yeah.
Did you see this thing at the Mall of America? The thing online about drone footage from Mall of America, which is an homage to Mighty Ducks. Did you see it?
No, I've been to Mall of America multiple times. Did somebody?
Well, go online now.
Yeah.
So remember, drone capture footage.
Of course.
Cameras.
Yeah.
So these guys who did this one in Minnesota, ironically, at the bowling alley a few months ago, did it at the Mall of America, and just go online and watch it. It has Mighty Ducks players, like people dressed as our characters, running through the mall. But you got to see it. It's the craziest thing you'll ever see. The drone footage of how they wrap around and go through the amusement park, and it's awesome. Watch it.
We'll check that out for sure. Yeah, I really appreciate you, sir. I appreciate you coming on. I mean that from my heart.
You got it. We'll do it again.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Steve. Be sure to, of course, check out Mighty Ducks Game Changers on Disney+. The last few episodes of the season are coming out over the next few weeks, but now's a perfect time to catch up on the first 6 episodes. And of course, you can watch them along with me and Lee on streamlounge.io every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. But until then, Steve, Brill, thank you so much for coming on our show here. And this has been the Geeks Who Like Sports Leaderboard Interviews. Good night, everybody.